Why don't you come on up here, and let's all applaud and welcome SelinaThomas to the podium.
Appreciate you.
Okay.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much to the Canyon Country Advisory Committee, Alan Bergman, for reaching out to me and giving me this face-to-face opportunity. Had an opportunity last time to do this by Zoom, and so face-to-face is always preferable for me. I am SelinaThomas. I'm a candidate for City Council. I am running for the second time this cycle. I ran last time largely virtually. I was the last horse in the race, 113 days, garnered close to 15,000 votes, and in a short amount of time, feel I had an impact enough on our community to run again. And the big question why people ask me why I run, so I'll answer it in advance of anyone asking. Can you raise your mic? Sure. Thank you, Steve. Can you hear me now? Yes. The big question that people ask me last cycle and this cycle as to why I'm running is at the height of COVID, a lot of my small businesses were greatly affected. And the request was there needed to be a voice in City Council for the small business at that time crisis, and now it's recovery. So that was really the antithesis of running. But during the course of that, a lot of issues emerged as to why I was suited for this opportunity. One, there is a lot of diversity and change in our community. I'm a reflection of that. I came to this community almost 12 years ago. Single mom, my kids were very small. They've all gone through the schools here. They've gone to Mountain View, Royal Seco, Saugus High School, and now COC. And so I built my business here around supporting my kids, around supporting small businesses, and I've been afforded the opportunity to buy a home here. So I'm rooted in this community as a homeowner. I've raised my kids here. They are student athletes and students that have done extremely well because they were positioned in this community in great schools, great coaches, and great opportunities to expand that into college. So now I have a daughter that's just received several merit and athletic scholarships because of the positioning here. Also, the businesses here, small businesses support small businesses, and that is really the purpose of my company. So I founded 6 Degrees HR Consulting right out of the Copper Hill Seco Starbucks. Many people remember me from that period of time when I was growing and they were growing, and now we've grown together and are in recovery mode. So a lot of different facets of who I am reflect what's possible in this community. And so I want to represent that. I want to represent the results that I've had as an individual. I want to represent the positioning that my kids have now as kids that have grown up here. And I want to represent the business community and why this is a great community to not only live, but do business. So that's really the purpose of my candidacy. I hope I have the opportunity to answer the questions that you may have and also hear things that maybe I haven't been able to be focused on because we've been shuttered. So I brought my notebook so that I can also write notes. And so feel free. Thank you. So if anyone has any questions. Ed Bernstein.
Go ahead. Yeah, you were. Thanks for noticing me. Hi, my name is Ed Bernstein. I do have a question, and I have a couple statements. It's not a monologue, but I met Selina at the Chamber breakfast about 12 years ago. She says I'm the first friend she ever met in Santa Clarita, and I'll believe her.
It's true.
I had to meet somebody on the way into the Chamber, but fair enough. We've known each other a long time. I have not gotten involved in any of the politics other than our billboard thing that happened a few years back, mainly because my company is very visible, and if you're on one side, you know, there's another side that doesn't agree with you. But one thing I've noticed since we've known each other is that you've always been helping local businesses in the most adversarial position of being an employer or employee. And over the years, I've referred companies to you that were not treating their employees right, or the employees weren't treating the companies right. And she's always handled it in a way that was very diplomatic And in this society right now with polarity that's out there, that someone could listen to both sides and say, does this sound reasonable?
Need to ask a question.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you, do you believe that your experience in HR is going to help you negotiate the tough issues that are going to be coming up in the next year for recovery?
Oh, thank you, Ed. I do feel that my skills are transferable to the concerns that constituents have. I feel that having that experience, not just in the business sector and doing this as a neutral party to employers and employees, but in advance of that, I was in the social service sector. And so there's also that element of working with people from that place as a social worker that, again, an advocate, someone that is always supporting for the solution. And so I feel like both of those experiences professionally allow me to have this moment to transfer it as a city council member.
Go ahead.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, Selina. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. I wanted to ask you about the Human Relations Roundtable. I don't know how familiar you are with that, but a lot of us are very upset that they are having meetings that are closed to the public. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Human Relations Roundtable, but I wanted to get your opinion as to whether they should have public meetings that allow us to come out and the press. And I just think that that's very important. I think it's a very important issue here in the community so that they can get a diversity of opinion, and just want to get your opinion on it. Thank you.
Sure. As a process person, I'm inherently, as a human resources specialist, compliance and infrastructure is essential. That's why businesses are able to think about the bottom line versus the crises with employees. So processes are important. And if there's a need for a review of what's happening at the Human Relations Roundtable, I think that it would be something that I would advocate for, simply because of the space that I come from in the compliance infrastructure side. I would want transparency. I would want accountability. Ultimately, in the things that I do daily, I require that not only of my employers to their employees, but in reverse, from the employees to the employer. And so thinking of it as constituents to the city, I use that analogy because there is an expectation as an employee that the employers do things right. In that same regard, the expectation of someone from the city or any city-sanctioned entity should be doing things right. So processes are important. If that's not evident to the constituents, I think presenting that in a way that the city can see that there needs to be a review, I completely agree with that. Not knowing to the degree that you spoke to the nuances, I'm more for making sure there's a process, reviewing that process meets the needs of everyone, and that the purpose of the roundtable is serving the community.
I'm going to run over to the Heart District now.
Sure. Nice to see you, Steve.
The fact that I'm leaving has nothing to do with the answer.
Thank you.
Anybody that wants to talk?
I've asked her, I know her character, I mean, I've known her, not a long time. Not really
We're trying to get you on the camera off, so.
This is more of a personal thing. I've sort of tested Selina, and I've asked her several questions, and over the years, I've come to admire her, and I know she's qualified. I know she's knowledgeable. She has a diverse background. It's not just, I know you talked about social work. You're a business person. You care about people, and you're always there. You're always there for people. You're always there for me. You're there for your community. I just, on a personal level, and that's why I'm here, to support you.
Thank you.
There's not enough time, for me to explain everything. and to, yeah.
Thank you, Susie.
So that's all I have to say. I don't have any questions or anything.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Diana Pretzloff. I would like to know specifically how you've helped local businesses here recover from the COVID pandemic. What specifically have you done to help our community and our businesses here?
Sure. So I actually, during the height of COVID, started doing videos, daily videos, specifically on the PPP loans, unemployment. At one point, remember, we had phase 1, phase 2 of what is essential and can be open. Specifically, I started doing videos to share that information, not knowing what the reach would be, but that it needed to be said. I essentially made myself essential. I looked in the list and I wasn't on it because we were all shuttered, and so all I could do was convey the information in a way that was specific, intentional, and it lended some hope to people that were, people that had built businesses here that supported families, not just their own. And that impact I took very personal because I had been a part of their growth as their HR consultant, and understanding that the business owners were in a crisis for not just their business, but for their employees. And that, for me, was the reason why I shared all the information. And then I advocated for things at the highest level with people that are making the decisions about the PPP loan, phase 1, phase 2, helping them understand that everyone's essential and that we have to find a way to either provide them support or open. And so I was afforded the opportunity to also have a show on the Signal called SelinaThomas, SCV's HR Guru, which expanded my reach. And I was so grateful to Richard Busman of the Signal to allow me to have that platform. But it lent some more context in a larger way for people to see what people were doing shuttered, how they were recovering, how did they pivot, and what they're looking forward to. And having that opportunity to give that to people, to me later, I found out meant more than I could have realized. So there was that value as well. But I also advocate with companies now to make sure that they have plans in place if we ever have to do this again. So specifically being a strategic partner to employers to make sure that we're not caught off guard and that we have processes in place to be open and to operate while shuttered. And I think that was really impactful as well, because no one could have seen this coming. But now that we know that this is a great possibility, we have to be able to exist knowing that that could happen again. Sure. Hi, Doug Frazier.
Doug Frazier. The city's in litigation with the districts becoming possible. Can you give us your stand on the districts and other voting rights in situations like term limits, or even voting for a mayor instead of having it appointed? Things like that. Can you?
Sure. Yes. So the districting, obviously, in litigation for, it may be applicable to other communities, and there's reasons for that that are appropriate for those communities, meaning running at large here is preferable for me as a candidate. I have more opportunity, and ultimately I will represent the entire community, not just one specific area. And I would want to do that, and that's who I am as a candidate. I represent a diverse as an individual, but I also represent that in the type of companies that I have. So I want to run at large and have more people have the opportunity to vote for me so that I could represent them. So that's my position on districting, and I don't know that it's appropriate in this environment, given that the premise of it is about specific demographics not being able to represent. And our community is so spread out, and there's not one area that's specific to one type of culture or person, and so everyone has the opportunity to vote when you're running at large. I believe in term limits. I believe that there should be a fresh perspective at the table, and that if you don't have a fresh perspective and other people that have a chance to represent their community and what they've brought to the community, then you don't have people that will engage. My top 5 priority, number 5, if you look at my literature, is civic engagement. Civic engagement allows for people to feel like the representatives are reflective of them. And when you don't have a change of perspective or persons in that seat, people lose interest and they don't engage as much. And I feel like people pay attention to this race because someone new, different, with a different perspective that is from this community, that has raised their kids here, built a business, is reflective of who they are. And currently, you have people on serving that have served as long as the city's existed, and I think it's reasonable to pass the torch right now. But I'm so appreciative and respectful of the leadership, because why I live here and why I want to live here is because what the previous leadership has done before. Any other questions? Don't be shy.
Well, if you have so much time, would you mind if I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
One of the things that have been coming up in the city lately is, of course, density and the number of people in a given area. Well, it seems as if all of our developers lately have discovered detached condominiums. And if you build a single-family dwelling as a detached condominium, it ends up on a postage stamp and does not have to comply with any of the city's setbacks or codes. Would you favor leaving things that way, or would you think that maybe we should put some other rules and regulations in place so that people aren't forced into that dense of a situation?
So not knowing enough about that specific ordinance or code versus houses versus detached, I never like to speak out of turn. I would want more information on the impact of that versus a development, a full development.
I apologize.
No, it's okay. I wanted to be fair to know as much as possible. Certainly educate me, though, Ellen, so that I know. Okay. I could share a little more if there aren't any questions about where I started and who I am as a person. Some of you may or may not know my story, but I am Filipino and African American. My father served in the Air Force. He met and married my mom in Manila. The late Dr. Gene Thomas was really, truly a trailblazer in and of itself. But he was stationed in Manila at 19. He saw my mom in a GI bar and wanted to be able to communicate and didn't speak the language, so he rode the bus for 6 months to learn how to say hello to her. And 9 months later, they were married, and the rest is history. But I get a lot of my attributes from him, and so in my travels, you'll often hear me speak about the lessons that I learned from Dr. Gene Thomas and how even if you're not familiar with a culture or a community or a type of person, it's important to jump in. And a lot of people ask me why I am evolving the way that I am, and it's because I had someone set that example. So he was in the Air Force, then he was an air traffic controller, and if many of you remember, they went on strike in 1980, and the air traffic controllers all got fired, and they had to find jobs and other careers. And so he took his GI Bill and became an educator, became a principal by the time I was in high school, and retired as superintendent, which is why he's Dr. Thomas. And so learning how and watching him evolve is part of why I'm able to do so. And obviously, with my kids in tow, they made the adjustment to live here, root themselves, and create for themselves their own identity. I share often with people that I'm really of the girls and myself, the black sheep. My kids are student athletes. They are incredible human beings, and it is not just because of my sacrifice to live here, but because they're rooted around good people. This is a community built of good people, good businesses, and that ethic and that integrity is also why I want to represent this community, because from the outside looking in, people see Santa Clarita as an ideal community to live in, and because people uphold those values. And it starts with families, it starts with individuals, and it expands. And that's who I am, and I'm representative of those things, and that's the reason why I would love to represent this community. Any other questions, comments?
Diana Pretzloff again. I've heard you talk about your relationships with members of law enforcement here in the community and how important they've been to you as a single mom raising your daughters. Could you talk a little bit about those relationships? I'm curious to learn more.
Definitely. And I had a chance yesterday to see our Captain Diaz at the VA event speak about what's happening in our community as we're coming out of COVID and some of the details of what was more prevalent during COVID and what's evolved out of COVID in terms of crime and different issues related to the district attorney. But deeper for me is that a lot of my daughter's coaches were off-duty police officers. They taught them athletics. They traveled with us as dads of daughters on the team, and I developed an understanding of who they are as people first. And I always had a great respect for law enforcement. There was another level of respect that developed as I got to know them as individuals and watched them after working, and Captain Diaz talked about this, the overtime that they're subject to really takes away from their family life. And these officers still took the time as coaches to teach my daughters a sport. But what comes with a sport is learning how to work with people, learning the integrity of getting up and honing your craft. And so law enforcement has always been, I've always had a great affection for law enforcement. My daughters were students at Saugus when the tragedy happened. I was a block away when it occurred. And I saw in my rearview mirror off-duty police officers get out and run towards the gunshots. And I spoke about this in my last campaign, that we can all speak about the issues that came out of the George Floyd and the 8 minutes and 57 seconds that it took to watch him pass away. And no one speaks about the minute and 23 that it took for law enforcement in this community to respond to Saugus and save lives. And for the grace of God, my daughter wasn't on the campus at that time, but understanding that we live in a community that's safe because of off and on-duty law enforcement. So I talk about the concerns I have with the terminology defunding. I feel like law enforcement needs to be funded in the right way, not defunded. Funded in a way that supports them, supports their training, supports their awareness of who they're serving in the community, that's diversity training, that's lending more insight about the different cultures that live here. And that falls under community policing. Community policing really lends to an improved relationship. If you look at a community that has and prescribes to community policing specifically in their funding, they have a better relationship, and it's not just during a crisis or when there's a tape. And so those types of things are so important to me, and I would speak to them in any situation in regards to my daughters, and they feel the same way. So thanks for asking that question.
Okay, so could you now take the next 5 minutes and kind of sum up what you think of the evening, and
Sure.
and of course tell us anything else you'd like to about your campaign?
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I thank everyone for coming, on your time off and racing here from wherever you may have come from to get to know me. And I want to be able to extend myself in any situation that allows anyone to really understand that I'm a constituent first, that I'm a person that has the same concerns and issues, and if I'm not aware of them, I want to be educated on them, much to your point on the detached versus housing. So that's important to me. So I would ask that people reach out to my team. Some of them are here. Never be afraid to ask me any questions. And then also, I'm really impressed with the engagement that's already happening this cycle, because we are able to be in person. There is truly an expectation that people engage in that. To me, it's going to improve the community. I look forward to not just the in-person campaigning, but the candidate forums, where I get to share ideas with the other candidates. You'll never hear me call them an opponent. I feel like they're counterparts, because ultimately I would probably work with them. And it's important that people understand that I'm not a divisive, negative person. And so ultimately, anyone that steps forward to serve, I have great respect for. Anyone that's an incumbent, I have respect for the foundation that you created. And why I'm running is because that foundation and passing that baton and torch is important. And then anyone new into this race, I think, is afforded the same grace that I received when I was running, that you're someone that's coming forward to serve and represent a community, and no one should be disparaging or negative towards that. So I think having people understand that I'm that type of candidate, because ultimately I would be working with anyone that's in any of those candidate forums.
Well, okay, let's give Selina a big hand. Well, thank you. Thank you, Selina.